There is a moment in every man's life where he realizes something painful yet powerful. Affection is not guaranteed. Attraction is not permanent, and emotional closeness can vanish overnight. One day she's laughing, calling, texting, leaning into your presence, and the next day she becomes distant, slow, detached, unpredictable. You feel her slipping away and your first instinct is to do more. More messages, more effort, more reassurance, more presence. But the darker truth is this: the more you do, the less she feels. The more you push, the faster she pulls away. Because women do not miss men who are always available. They miss the man who knows how to disappear. And that is where the real power lies. Not in chasing her, not in begging for attention, but in triggering psychological mechanisms inside her mind that she cannot consciously resist. These mechanisms are ancient, emotional, irrational, and incredibly effective when applied with calm confidence. When you understand them, you stop trying to convince her of your value, and instead you make her feel your value in a way that is impossible for her to ignore. The dark truth is that missing someone doesn't start when they're gone. Missing someone starts when they were once present and then suddenly unavailable. It is the emotional shockwave created by contrast. It is the emptiness you leave behind when your energy is no longer feeding her ego, soothing her insecurities, or occupying her attention. This is not manipulation. This is psychology. A woman cannot miss what she already has. She can only miss what she feels she is losing. But making her miss you like crazy is not about playing childish games or pretending to be someone you're not. It's about stepping into a stronger, colder, more disciplined version of yourself. A version she never saw coming. A version who no longer chases validation. A version who understands distance as a strategic tool. A version who knows how to disrupt her emotional patterns until she feels the absence of your presence more intensely than she ever felt the presence itself. When you apply these 5 dark psychology tactics, you create an emotional vacuum that pulls her back toward you with force. Her mind begins to replay old moments. Her heart starts questioning her decisions. Her insecurity begins rising quietly. Her desire to reconnect grows stronger the longer she sits with the uncertainty. She starts feeling the imbalance. You are no longer orbiting her, and in that moment, everything shifts. She starts thinking about you at night, wondering if you're talking to someone else, checking your social media, testing the waters, creating excuses to contact you again. You do not convince her to miss you. You create conditions where missing you becomes inevitable. These 5 tactics are not for the weak or the insecure. They require emotional self-control, discipline, and a stoic mindset. But when used correctly, they flip the dynamic entirely. And she becomes the one longing for your attention, imagining your next move, and chasing the connection she once took for granted. Before we start, a quick reminder: the real transformation doesn't happen on YouTube, it happens inside the community. If these videos have opened your eyes, what's inside will rebuild your mindset completely. It's not just a course, it's a brotherhood. A private space where men master attraction, emotional control, and the psychology of power. You don't join for a month, you join for life. Every future course, book, and lesson is yours forever. No subscriptions, no limits, just one decision that changes your direction. If you're serious about growth, discipline, and purpose, click the link below. Join the community. Enroll once, grow forever. Let's dive in. Tactic number 1: the sudden shift. In energy, the contrast effect. If you want to make a woman miss you with intensity, you must understand the psychological power of contrast. Humans, especially women, do not react to consistency. They react to sudden change. When your energy shifts abruptly yet calmly, it disrupts her emotional equilibrium. This tactic is subtle, quiet, and incredibly effective because it leverages one of the deepest instincts in female psychology: the need to understand emotional patterns. Most men lose women because they become predictable. They give the same energy every day, always present, always responding quickly, always available. And while this feels comforting to you, to her, it slowly becomes emotionally invisible. She stops noticing the effort because it never changes. But when you implement a sudden shift in energy, not brusque, not rude, not dramatic, but deliberate, your presence becomes striking again. This tactic works because the female mind is wired to detect changes in emotional tone. When your good morning messages stop, when your long replies shorten naturally, when your excited energy becomes calm, when your availability decreases even slightly, she begins to sense it immediately. She won't show it. She won't admit it. But internally, something wakes up in her psychology, curiosity mixed with fear of loss. She starts wondering what happened. She replays recent conversations. She questions whether her behavior pushed you away. She wonders if another woman has your attention. She begins analyzing your emotional state far more intensely than before. This is the power of contrast. It forces her mind to focus on what changed. And the moment she begins noticing the shift, she also begins missing the version of you she once took for granted. A sudden shift in energy also creates emotional scarcity, a force far more powerful than physical distance. When your attention becomes less predictable, your presence becomes more valuable. She becomes more alert, more invested, more sensitive to your behavior. This is the beginning of her missing you, not because she lost you, but because she fears she might. The most important part of this tactic is intention. You are not withdrawing to punish her or manipulate her. You are recalibrating. You are stepping back into your center. You are reclaiming emotional control. When you shift your energy without anger, she feels it differently. It doesn't feel like conflict. It feels like distance, and distance creates longing. Stoic men do not chase validation. They create emotional balance around themselves. When you shift your energy from enthusiasm to calmness, from availability to selective presence, from predictability to mystery, you trigger a psychological pursuit instinct inside her that she cannot fully control. She starts noticing your absence before you even leave. She starts feeling your distance before you physically create it. She starts missing you before she even understands why. The first step to making her miss you like crazy is not disappearing. It's changing the direction of your energy so subtly that she feels the void before she sees the silence. Tactic number 2, the strategic withdrawal, silence that speaks for you. Once the shift in your energy has unsettled her comfort, the next step is to introduce strategic withdrawal, a form of silence that is not passive, not emotional, and not angry, but intentional. This is one of the most powerful dark psychology tactics because it taps directly into her subconscious fear of emotional disconnection. Women do not miss men who drown them in attention. They miss the man whose presence they felt then suddenly had to live without. The effectiveness of this tactic lies in its timing. You do not withdraw when things are already bad. You withdraw after giving consistency, warmth, or stability. That contrast amplifies the emotional impact of your absence. Your silence becomes louder because it interrupts a pattern she assumed she could depend on. Humans fear losing what they feel secure in, and women especially respond intensely to emotional rhythms. When those rhythms pause, their psychology begins to shift. Strategic withdrawal is not ghosting. It is not punishment. It is distance with purpose. It is the disciplined pullback that gives her space to feel everything she has been ignoring. Her attachment, her questions, her insecurities, her longing, and her fear of losing your emotional presence. When a woman does not have access to your energy, she begins to realize how much she valued it. Here's what happens internally when you withdraw correctly. She begins thinking about you more often because silence creates mental loops. The brain hates incomplete emotional patterns, and your sudden quietness becomes an unresolved thread she cannot stop pulling at. She starts looking for signs of your state, checking your social media, watching your stories, scrolling through old messages, evaluating her last words to you. She starts analyzing your absence as if it holds secret meaning because to her it does. She also begins projecting. A woman's mind fills silence with her own fears and scenarios. If you were once consistent, she fears she's pushing you away. If you were once warm, she fears she misread you. If she was careless with your energy, she fears you might be moving on. And if she had even a slight emotional attachment, strategic withdrawal magnifies it until it becomes unavoidable. This tactic works best when you remain emotionally stable, active, and focused on your purpose. She must feel your distance, not your resentment. She must sense your absence, not your anger. The power comes from the impression that your silence is not directed at her but directed toward your own growth and priorities. This creates emotional polarity. She feels the loss of your attention yet cannot blame you for withdrawing because nothing about your behavior communicates pettiness or frustration. When done correctly, silence becomes a psychological mirror. It forces her to confront something she rarely admits. She misses your energy more than she expected. She feels the void your presence once filled. She begins to value you more intensely because your absence recalibrates her perception. What was once taken for granted becomes precious. What was once assumed becomes uncertain. What was once easy becomes complicated. Strategic withdrawal, when grounded in stoic discipline, does not chase or plead. It allows her mind to approach you on its own, guided by longing rather than logic, and longing is far more powerful than desire. It is the emotional glue that makes her miss you long before she realizes why. Tactic number 3, the controlled ambiguity. Make her mind work overtime. If there is one psychological force that makes a woman miss you relentlessly, it's controlled ambiguity, the art of being present enough to remain in her awareness, yet unpredictable enough to remain in her thoughts. This tactic is powerful because the female mind is wired to resolve emotional uncertainty. When she cannot fully read you, she begins to invest more mental and emotional energy trying to understand where she stands. Ambiguity is not manipulation, it is the natural byproduct of a man who is grounded in his purpose, selective with his energy, and disciplined in his emotional expression. Instead of giving her constant clarity, you give her space to interpret your intentions. Instead of explaining your feelings, you let your behavior speak with depth and subtlety. Instead of telling her what she means to you, you let her wonder, and that wondering is what creates longing. Here's what controlled ambiguity looks like. You respond but not instantly. You engage but not deeply every time. You show interest but not in predictable patterns. You communicate but without emotional over-disclosure. You remain kind but not eager. She feels your presence but can't fully grasp your emotional position. She senses attraction but can't measure its intensity. She observes your behavior but cannot categorize it easily. This emotional gray area forces her to invest more attention, more imagination, and more emotional processing into the connection. And that investment, her internal effort, is what makes her miss you. Ambiguity also activates her attachment instincts. Women seek emotional clarity, not because they're controlling, but because clarity gives them security. When clarity is temporarily absent, their emotions awaken. They begin searching for signs, replaying conversations, analyzing your tone, and looking for subtext in your messages. This isn't insecurity, it's human psychology. People chase what they don't fully understand, not what is completely predictable. Controlled ambiguity becomes even more powerful when combined with the first 2 tactics. The shift in energy and strategic withdrawal. Now she experiences your warmth and your distance, your presence and your silence, your engagement and your detachment. And this mix creates emotional tension that her mind cannot easily resolve. Emotional tension is the birthplace of longing. The key to this tactic is balance. Too much ambiguity feels like disinterest. Too little ambiguity feels like neediness. The stoic masculine frame finds the midpoint. Calm presence with emotional restraint. You're not cold. You're composed. You're not distant. You're disciplined. You're not unreadable. You're simply not broadcasting everything anymore. When a woman cannot categorize you, she cannot dismiss you. When she cannot predict you, she cannot control you. When she cannot fully read you, she cannot forget you. Controlled ambiguity also protects your own power. You never overshare your emotional world. You never chase reassurance. You never place your identity in her hands. You maintain mystery not for manipulation, but because a man with purpose has a life outside validation, and she can feel that difference instantly. This tactic makes her miss you because her mind becomes the battlefield. She begins imagining possibilities, constructing stories, and filling the silence with her own emotions. She is not missing a text. She is missing the connection she cannot fully grasp. Controlled ambiguity is the art of making her think more about you than you ever need to think about her. And once her mind becomes your messenger, longing becomes inevitable. Tactic number 4, the social proof shift. Make her realize you are wanted by others. One of the most powerful yet misunderstood dark psychology tactics is the social proof shift. The moment she realizes that your value is recognized by people other than her. Women are deeply influenced by the perceived desirability of a man. Not because they're superficial, but because female psychology is wired to evaluate a man through the lens of social validation, respect, and emotional scarcity. When she sees or senses that other people value you, admire you, enjoy your presence, or desire your attention, her perception of you changes instantly. She begins to feel something she cannot fully control. Competitive instinct. It's not always jealousy in the dramatic sense, but it's a subtle emotional tightening inside her chest. A feeling that another woman might experience the version of you she once had access to. And that is when missing you becomes unavoidable. The social proof shift doesn't mean showing off, bragging, or trying to trigger jealousy. In fact, the moment you try, the effect collapses. This tactic works only when the value is authentic, silent, and effortless, when it appears naturally through your lifestyle, your confidence, your achievements, your social circle, your activities. It communicates something far more powerful than words. You are a man who is chosen, not a man who waits to be chosen. Here's how this shift affects her internally. She suddenly becomes aware that she is not the only woman who notices your traits, your ambition, your calmness, your humor, your discipline, your mystery. She sees that your energy doesn't disappear without her. She realizes you were not dependent on her presence. She understands that losing you isn't just losing a man. It's losing a man other women recognize as high value. Your silence now feels less like a reaction and more like your natural state. Your distance feels less like punishment and more like a man prioritizing his life. Your identity becomes larger than the connection itself, and nothing makes a woman miss a man more intensely than the realization that he is desired beyond her imagination. The social proof shift activates a psychological pattern known as selective attention bias. Once she perceives your value rising, she suddenly begins noticing details about you she previously overlooked. Your discipline, your style, your confidence, your growth. She becomes more sensitive to the idea of losing you, even if she once acted indifferent. But here's the dark part. The shift amplifies missing you because it forces her to confront her own inaction. She starts thinking, what if another woman gets the version of him I didn't appreciate? What if I misjudged him? What if he's moving on? These thoughts are uncomfortable, but they are powerful motivators. They push her into emotional pursuit. Stoic men never chase social validation. They create lives that naturally attract it. And when a woman sees a man living with purpose surrounded by respect and opportunities, she cannot help but reassess her own value in his world. Your presence becomes elevated. Your attention becomes scarce. Your absence becomes heavy. She doesn't miss you because you disappeared. She misses you because she realizes that losing you means someone else could gain you. This is the moment her emotional trajectory shifts completely. The connection no longer revolves around whether you want her. It revolves around whether she still has a chance. Tactic number 5. The identity shift. Become the man. She thought she'd never lose. The most powerful dark psychology tactic is not about silence, ambiguity, or distance. It is about identity. When you shift your identity in a way she did not expect, you trigger a deep emotional response that goes far beyond attraction. You trigger loss aversion, one of the strongest psychological forces in human behavior. This is the moment she begins to realize that the version of you she once took for granted no longer exists, and that the new version may not include her. The identity shift is not external, it is internal. It is not about proving anything. It is not about impressing anyone. It is about evolving into a man who finally prioritizes his discipline, his goals, his purpose, his emotional control, and his self-respect. When she sees this shift, even from a distance, something profound awakens inside her. The fear that she miscalculated your value. Women do not miss the man who chases them. They miss the man who changes without needing them. This tactic works because you are no longer acting from reaction. You are acting from transformation. You become more stable, more grounded, more selective, more composed. Your presence becomes heavier, more intentional, more refined. You speak less but with more meaning. You respond, slower but with more strength. Your silence becomes more powerful because it is now backed by purpose, not emotion. Here's what happens in her mind when your identity shifts. She begins replaying old interactions, not to recall what happened, but to question her role in losing access to the man you are becoming. She compares the old you to the new you, and the contrast creates emotional dissonance. She realizes you no longer seek validation, and that destroys any emotional leverage she had. She senses your rising standards, ones she may no longer automatically qualify for. And this is where missing you transforms into something deeper. Regret. Regret is the emotional bridge between I miss him and I need to fix this. It pushes her into action. It forces her to reassess her behavior. It makes her view you through a completely new lens. The identity shift is the point where your value becomes undeniable. You no longer respond the same. You no longer tolerate the same. You no longer give the same access to your time, energy, and attention. And the moment she sees this, she experiences something that no other tactic can create. The fear that she has been replaced not by another woman, but by your evolution. Stoic men do not evolve to impress others. They evolve because stillness destroys greatness. And that evolution becomes the gravitational force that pulls her back, not because you manipulated her, but because you became the version of yourself she underestimated, a version that she did not expect to lose, a version she now misses more intensely than she ever expected. This is the final and most powerful tactic. You do not make her miss you by withholding attention. You make her miss you by becoming a man she never thought would walk away and a man she fears she can no longer reach. In the end, making her miss you like crazy has almost nothing to do with tricks, tactics, or strategies, and everything to do with who you become in the process. Women do not miss men because those men disappear. They miss men who rise, men who evolve, men who detach from the need for approval and step into the quiet, dangerous confidence of self-mastery. A woman doesn't long for the man who waited for her. She longs for the man who no longer needs her. These 5 dark psychology tactics work because they expose the deeper truth beneath every connection. People value what they feel they might lose. When your energy shifts suddenly, she is forced to question her assumptions. When you withdraw strategically, she feels the absence of your presence in a way she didn't expect. When you introduce controlled ambiguity, her mind becomes the engine of longing. When she sees your rising social value, her competitive instinct awakens. And when your identity evolves into something stronger, calmer, more disciplined, she realizes she is not missing your messages, she's missing the version of you she thought she had secured. The power has never been in ignoring her. The power has always been in becoming a man who no longer fears being ignored. A man who no longer offers emotional oxygen to people who suffocate his purpose. A man who no longer negotiates his worth through validation. A man whose life is not built around someone else's attention but around his own mission. That version of you is not just attractive, it is unforgettable, and that is why she misses you. Not because you disappeared, but because you returned to yourself. Not because you withheld your attention, but because you upgraded your identity. Not because you used dark psychology, but because you used discipline, presence, and silence in a way that revealed who you are at your core. When she looks at you again, and she will, she won't be looking at the same man she once pulled away from. She'll be looking at a man who outgrew the version of himself that needed her. A man who commands respect without demanding it. A man whose emotional stability feels like gravity. A man whose distance is not a game but a standard. A man whose presence is now something she must earn. And that more than anything you could say or do is what makes her miss you with a force she cannot hide, cannot control, and cannot deny. Remember, you never win by pulling her closer. You win by pulling yourself forward. And the man who chooses himself is the man she can never truly walk away from. Remember, knowledge means nothing without action. If you're ready to rise above emotion and lead with purpose, join the community today at the link below. Enroll once, grow forever.